Today's lesson is Deadly Oddity, some strange facts about the Portuguese man of war. Hi, everybody. I'm Roger.
And I'm Mike.
And welcome to our program. And in today's lesson, we're going to be talking about a kind of sea creature. It's not really a fish. It's certainly not a shark. It's not a whale. But it's actually similar to a jellyfish, right?
It is similar to a jellyfish, but not exactly a jellyfish. We're going to learn a whole new word for a whole category of animals here. But yeah, basically, like a jellyfish, it floats on the surface of the water, or it floats in the water. Some jellyfish can actually push themselves around, but a Portuguese man of war is similar to jellyfish in the way that you don't want to touch it. You want to respect this odd creature of the sea. Look at it. It is very beautiful and even bizarre, but definitely keep your distance. Kind of like its namesake, like a Portuguese man of war, a real warship. Again, observe, but keep your distance.
That's right. Look, but don't touch or don't get close to it. And yes, this is the fascinating world of sea creatures. So let's begin our lesson by listening to the first part of our lesson, and then we'll come back to discuss it.
Deadly Oddity. Some strange facts about the Portuguese man of war. Floating along on the surface of the ocean, a beautiful yet deadly creature drifts with the current. With its long tentacles and gas-filled bladder, it looks like a jellyfish. However, it's actually a siphonophore, a strange colony of genetically identical individuals. Yes, unlike a jellyfish, a Portuguese man of war isn't a single organism. Rather, it's a collection of countless tiny organisms that must work in concert to survive. Read on to learn some other amazing facts about this bizarre and interesting creature.
大家好，第一部分我们来看到标题单字 oddity， 这个名词的意思是怪人、怪事，也可以是奇特或是古怪的意思。例如 Abigail loves wearing unique clothes, which makes her an oddity to her classmates. Abigail 喜欢穿着独特的衣服，这让她在同学眼中显得很奇怪。再看一个例子 Many appealing oddities were recorded in this book. 许多吸引人的奇闻异事被记录在这本书中。接着看到 organism， 它是名词，指的是生物或是有机体。举例来说 Each organism plays an important role in its ecosystem. 每个生物体在其生态系统中都扮演着重要角色。下一个来介绍片语 in concert， 它的意思是一起或是共同。例如We must work in concert with local communities to protect endangered wildlife. 我们必须与当地社区共同合作，以保护濒临绝种的野生动物。再来看到形容词 bizarre， 它表示奇异的或是古怪的。例如 Astronomers spotted a bizarre anomaly in space. 天文学家在太空中看到一个超乎寻常的异象。或是 Someone left a series of bizarre messages on Linda's phone. 有人在琳达的电话里留了一堆奇怪的留言。
Okay, in the title here, it says it's a deadly oddity. Of course, something's deadly when it causes death. And an oddity is just something strange and unusual. It's not normal. It's not something we see every day. And we're going to be talking about some strange facts about the Portuguese man of war. Again, this is a kind of sea creature that is similar to a jellyfish, but not exactly the same thing.
Exactly. So let's begin the passage. Floating along on the surface of the ocean, a beautiful yet deadly creature drifts with the current. So there you go. That's where you might see it, floating along on the surface of the ocean. So part of it will actually stick up above the water, the same way boats float along the surface of the ocean. And this is a beautiful yet deadly creature, and it drifts with the current. Again, like a boat with no power, or a leaf floating in a river, or a piece of wood floating in a stream. It gets pushed along by the movement of the water, by the current, maybe by the wind as well. It doesn't actually power itself. It doesn't have a motor, or in this case, being an animal, it doesn't have legs or flippers to flip or push or move itself through the water. So basically, it just goes with the flow. It goes with the movement of the water and the winds.
Exactly. That's what drifting is. You just kind of move along with the water. You're pushed by a current. with its long tentacles and gas-filled bladder, it looks like a jellyfish. So this is a feature of this particular creature. It has long tentacles. And tentacles are kind of arms that stick out from a creature like an octopus or like a squid. And in this case, it has long tentacles, which could be sort of like arms or legs, which they use to feel around with. And it also has this gas-filled bladder. Usually the bladder in your body is where your urine goes before it comes out of your body. In this particular case, though, it's filled with gas and not with liquid.
Yeah, so you can think of it just kind of as a gas-filled bag. So it looks like a jellyfish. However, it's actually a siphonophore, a strange colony of genetically identical individuals. Interesting. So yeah, it looks like a jellyfish, but it is actually a siphonophore. And what is that? It's a strange colony of genetically identical individuals. So that's really interesting. It's actually not kind of a creature. It's several creatures that have sort of joined together to become a Portuguese man of war. Now, they're able to join together because they are genetically identical individuals. So that kind of is a very unusual sort of form in nature, I guess you would say. If something's genetically identical, the DNA matches. If you have two identical twins, that would probably be the closest in human nature that we come to genetically identical individuals. But if you're cloning people in a science lab using DNA technology, then you would be able to create genetically identical cells and eventually creatures. But this is something that's happened naturally, and that's why it's its own class of animals, siphonophore. It says, yes, unlike a jellyfish, a Portuguese man of war isn't a single organism. So there you go. It is actually kind of like a community, a colony of these genetically identical individuals that have created a Portuguese man of war. So this is very different from jellyfish, all right? I mean, in kind of the same way that we often think of bugs and spiders, insects and spiders are kind of being the same. They're actually very, very different, even though they sort of do the same things or fill the same role in nature. This is not a single organism. Jellyfish are, the Portuguese man of war is not. An organism is something that is created by nature. It is a natural thing. It is born. It has a lifespan. It dies. It probably feeds on oxygen. It is made of carbon. It's basically a very basic living entity.
A living thing, basically, an organism. And rather, instead, it's a collection of countless tiny organisms that must work in concert to survive. Okay, so rather here just means it's not the first thing, it's something else we're going to mention. And what it actually is a collection or a colony of all these organisms, and it's a countless number. There are all sorts of them, hundreds if not thousands or maybe even millions, and they work in concert to survive. Now here, in concert does not mean that all of these organisms are going to a music concert, right?
No, it means they're working together. They're cooperating. In other words, if you work in concert with people, you're cooperating, you're sharing the work, you're making the effort easier for everyone by everyone pitching in. So let's read on to learn some other amazing facts about this bizarre and interesting creature. Yes, if I tell you that this animal is described as bizarre, by this point you're probably not too surprised because bizarre means strange, unusual, weird. We've already learned it. It's a siphonophore. It's made up of genetically identical individuals, and it's not a single organism. That's definitely weird or bizarre. Let's pause here and listen to the middle part of our article. It was named after a type of ship. The odd name, Portuguese man of war, probably came from the creature's resemblance to 16th century Portuguese warships known as men of war. In particular, its gas bladder, which resembles a sail, likely led to the name. Another theory suggests that the name derived from the bladder's similarity to the helmets worn by 16th century Portuguese soldiers.
Okay, let's now talk about the middle part of our article. It has a title here. It was named after a type of ship. Okay, that's one particular point that we want to emphasize in the second part of our lesson for today. A ship, of course, is a vessel at sea, and it was named after a type of ship, not an individual ship like the Titanic or something like that, but it's actually named after a type of ship like a battleship or an aircraft carrier or a frigate or whatever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can kind of see that. It has this resemblance to these warships. A warship is basically a ship, a floating vessel that is created for fighting. So if you're in the Navy, you'll probably be based on a warship. In particular, it says its gas bladder, this bag filled with gas, which allows it to float on the surface, its gas bladder, which resembles a sail, likely led to the name. Yeah, I guess you can kind of see that. Maybe from a bit of a distance, it would look like this gas bladder is kind of like a tiny little sailing ship. It resembles a sail. We're not saying it looks exactly like a sailing boat. Clearly it doesn't. But if it has some similar visual characteristics, if you could look at it on a cloudy day or when you just woke up and go, hey, is that a tiny little ship? Oh, no, that's not a ship. It's something else. But it looks close enough like something to maybe confuse you or to maybe allow you to make that connection in your mind. If you've ever been to the east coast of Taiwan and you've seen Turtle Island, you will know that it was named because it resembles a turtle floating there in the water. Doesn't look exactly the same, but similar in some ways.
Right, so it resembles that ship, and that's the verb to resemble, and the noun form is resemblance. It has a resemblance to the Portuguese warships known as men of war. That's the plural form of man of war. Now, the old sailing ships had sails. Sailboats still exist, but they're primarily used for recreation. Most ships are powered with an engine, but back then they had sails, you know, those big towers, those big masts with the white sheets hanging from them. In this particular case, the bladder looks like a sail, or it resembles a sail, and that likely led to the name.
Another theory suggests that the name derived from the bladder's similarity to the helmets worn by 16th century Portuguese soldiers. So there's another way it could have come up with this name, Portuguese man of war. The name derived or came from. When something derives from something, it comes from somewhere. That's the source of it. It might have changed since then. We could say rock and roll derived from a mixture of rhythm and blues and country and western music in the United States. Of course, it's changed in many ways since then, but that's kind of the original source. That's sort of where it all started. So the name might have come or might have started from the bladder's similarity to the helmets worn by 16th century Portuguese soldiers. You can also imagine Spanish conquistadors from around that time. They had these sort of round helmets with a scooped bottom and a kind of I guess you could call it a sail or a fin or a blade on the top. Have you ever seen a picture of the first explorers and the first soldiers to visit Latin America, Central America, the Spanish conquistadors? You can get an idea of what this helmet looks like and how possibly the Portuguese man of war, the real ships, of course, which would have been filled with soldiers wearing these helmets, that's where the name might have come or derived from. All right, that's the first odd fact about this odd creature. We have more coming up, so let's check out the final part of today's article. Its tentacles can be as long as an Olympic-sized swimming pool. While they're typically around 30 feet in length, the tentacles of some Portuguese men of war can extend to a staggering 165 feet. Armed with venom-containing cells, these tentacles can supply an agonizing sting. Worse yet, the tentacles remain dangerous even when separated from the rest of the creature, capable of stinging unsuspecting swimmers or beachgoers.
第三部分来看到 staggering 这个形容词的意思是惊人的或是令人震惊的。例如 There is a staggering number of insects on Earth that far outnumbers humans. 地球上的昆虫数量十分惊人，远远超过人类的数量。又或者是 Tom found that the cost of his preferred hotel was staggering, so he decided to stay in a cheaper one. Tom 发现他想住的饭店费用高得吓人，所以他决定住便宜一点的饭店。下一个是 agonizing 这个形容词，表示令人十分痛苦的或是折磨人的。例如 Brent has an agonizing toothache, so he took a day off to see the dentist. Brent 牙痛得很厉害，所以他请了一天假去看牙医。或者 Christopher thinks that his girlfriend's shopping schedule is agonizing. Christopher 认为他女友的购物行程十分折磨。另外补充相关单字 agony, A-G-O-N-Y, agony. 它是名词，指的是肉体或精神的极度痛苦。例如 The injured man lay on the ground in agony, waiting for the ambulance to take him to the hospital. 那名受伤的男子十分痛苦地躺在地上，等待救护车将他送往医院。或是 In this horror film, the crazy scientist brings the victims much agony through his experiments. 在这部恐怖电影中，疯狂的科学家透过他的实验，给受害者带来巨大的痛苦。最后是 unsuspecting， 它是形容词，指的是毫无戒备心的或是没有疑心的。例如 The children played a prank on the unsuspecting teacher. 孩子们对毫无预警的老师恶作剧。又或者说 A thief sneaked into the unsuspecting victim's house in the middle of the night. 一名小偷半夜潜入毫无戒心的受害者家中。
Okay, and the final part here says, its tentacles can be as long as an Olympic-size swimming pool, which is quite long. If you've ever seen the Olympics before, you know that those swimmers swim in a pretty long pool. And so, of course, those tentacles can be that long, and that's kind of scary. So it could actually reach out and touch you if you're not careful. So yeah, don't go swimming near those creatures because they might grab you with those tentacles, even if it seems that they're far away from you.
That's true. Well, they're typically, it says, around 30 feet in length, so not quite as long as an Olympic pool. The tentacles of some Portuguese men of war can extend to a staggering 165 feet. That's pretty incredible, and that is around the length of an Olympic-sized swimming pool. But typically or normally, they're not that long. But if you do come across one with those super long tentacles, you would definitely describe them as staggering. Staggering is something that's kind of amazing, awe-inspiring. It might knock you back on your feet a little bit, as we would use the verb stagger to talk about. But basically, it's absolutely incredible. If you've ever stood at the bottom of Taipei 101 and looked straight up with your neck turned all the way back, you would go, wow, this is a staggeringly tall building. The height of this building is staggering. You know it's tall, but then when you get close to it, you realize just how tall it is. So yes, 165 feet is a staggering length for these tentacles to be.
Yep, a staggering length, an incredible length, an unbelievable length. They are quite long there, so again, you don't want to get too close to them, although normally their tentacles are only around 30 feet long. And armed with venom-containing cells, these tentacles can supply an agonizing sting. So here, of course, we're talking about the content of those tentacles. They have these venom-containing cells. Cells, of course, are the basic building blocks of tissue in living creatures, and it has venom inside of those cells. Venom is like poison, okay? So if you come in contact with those tentacles and with those cells, the poison can get to you, and you can get stung rather incredibly, rather seriously. And here we've got the phrase to be armed with. That means it has this weapon.
And absolutely. They could be agonizing if you were unlucky enough to touch one. Very, very painful. I think sometimes they have led to the deaths of people. They get stung out in the ocean. The pain is so agonizing, people end up drowning and things like that. But I guess the best thing is just to try to avoid it. But here's the bad news. It says, worse yet, the tentacles remain dangerous even when separated from the rest of the creature. Well, that's not good news. Capable of stinging unsuspecting swimmers or beach goers. So yes, the sting from the tentacles is agonizing. That's what it uses to kill small fish that it ends up eating. But these tentacles, they remain dangerous. They stay dangerous or they stay painful even when separated from the rest of the creature. So something should happen to the Portuguese man of war and it loses a tentacle. That tentacle might float or drift off on its own. If it gets near a beach or something, it could sting an unsuspecting swimmer or beachgoer, and it is still painful. It will still contain its venom or its poison. It will still be just as much of a problem if you touch it when it's attached to the man of war or when it is disattached and floating on its own. So yes, for unsuspecting swimmers or beachgoers who don't see that gas-filled bladder, who think they're in an area where there is no danger from this animal, they could still be in danger. That is why these these swimmers or beachgoers can be described as unsuspecting. I mean, if you see that gas bladder and you know that it's a dangerous animal, you just wouldn't go close to it, would you? Of course not. But if you don't see it around, you don't suspect it, you're not prepared, you don't know of any danger in the water, and you're just happily swimming around near a beach, and you brush against one of these loose tentacles, I guess we could call them, and it could still be a very agonizing experience from this very unusual animal.
Right, so not only is the creature itself dangerous, but its tentacles are also dangerous even if they are separated from the main body of the creature. So yeah, watch out there, and I guess the advice there would be to just simply not swim in the ocean, but people still like to go to the beach and go surfing and scuba diving and stuff like that. So you just have to be aware that this creature is going to be there along with other creatures like sharks and whales and dolphins or whatever. They could be dangerous. You never know. And again, you're unsuspecting if you don't know it's there. You don't really believe there's any danger. I could say, for example, the cat snuck up on the unsuspecting mouse. The mouse did not know that it was about to be savagely killed by a cat and ripped apart and eaten by that cat. That's what cats do. They have that instinct to attack mice like that. And yes, you want to avoid getting stung by these creatures, so please take precautions. That brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Here comes Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。首先看到课文标题有一个补充单字是 oddity， 它是由形容词 odd 再加上名词字尾 ity 所构成的。那我们来补充一下这个字尾， ity 是抽象名词字尾，用来表示特质、情况、状态、程度等等，那么字尾 ty 是它的变形。那我们看到在 oddity 这个字当中， odd 是形容奇怪的、古怪的，那么 ity 这个字尾是指特质或状态，合在一起 oddity 就可以表达怪人、怪事或者是奇特古怪。我们再举一个例子是 serenity， 它是由 serene 形容平静的，然后加上 ity 表示状态而来，那 serenity 就可以表达宁静或平静。好，另外在今天的课文里面，我们有看到几个复合形容词，像是 gas-filled充满气体的， 16th century 16世纪的， venom containing 含有毒液的等等。我们就顺便来学一些常见复合形容词的组成方式。首先呢是跟数字有关的复合形容词，那第一个组成方式是由数字连字号名词，像 4 year 4年的， 5 star 5星级的。那特别注意这个组合里面的名词一律是用单数表示，我们也可以用到序数连字号名词来构成复合形容词，就像刚刚说的 16th century， 或者是像 7th grade 用来表达7年级的。另一个组成方式是用数字连字号名词，那名词的字尾有加 ed， 像 three-legged 表示3条腿的， two-sided 表示双面的。我们再来看看与名词搭配所形成的这个复合形容词，像名词连字号名词。好，第一种方式是名词连字号名词，像是 name brand 表示名牌的。还有呢，可以用名词连字号名词，那后面这个名词字尾有加 ed， 像 freckle-faced 满脸雀斑的。下一种组成方式是名词连字号现在分词 VING， 像文中的 venom containing， 还有像 award winning 得奖的。再来看到另一个方式是名词连字号 PP， 像文中的 gas-filled， 还有像 man-made 表示人工的、人造的。另一个组合方式是名词连字号形容词，像是 world famous 世界知名的， duty free 免税的。好，那最后一部分我们来看看跟形容词的搭配所组成的复合形容词。你可以用形容词连字号形容词，像 little known 表示鲜为人知的。形容词连字号名词，像是 long term 长期的， part time 兼职的。还有形容词连字号名词，那名词后面字尾有加 ed， 像 short haired 短发的 old-fashioned 过时的，还有形容词连字号 VING， 像 good-looking 是好看的，还有形容词连字号过去分词 PP， 像 ready-made 表示现成的。好，那以上就是今天的重点整理，我们来回顾今天单字吧。
Genetically, Brenda sings just like her mother, which suggests that her singing ability is genetically influenced. Organism. Even a single drop of pond water can be full of life, containing thousands of tiny organisms. Bizarre. Just to draw attention, the pop star wore a bizarre hat covered in colorful feathers. Resemble. Zebrafish got their name because they have stripes that resemble those of a zebra. Derive. The song's popularity derives mainly from its beautiful melody. Agonizing. The agonizing wait for her test results left her feeling anxious. Unsuspecting. The cat quietly approached the unsuspecting mouse from behind.
Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Mike.
I am Roger. See you next time.